It's like coming true, Sean. Like that to me was a freaking wake up call. I couldn't believe what was going on. Therefore, I really took this strong approach to questioning everything. A lot of people have put properties in their self-managed super fund. You have to pay an unrealized capital gains tax above the 3 million. You would now have to pay a tax. Now, how do you pay the tax? Where are you coming up with that money? Out of your pocket, or, which most people don't have that, most Australians don't have $100,000 sitting around in their bank balance, right? This is how ludicrous this is. You would have to sell the property to then pay the tax. But guess what? Because you sold the property, you now have to pay capital gains tax as well. I could definitely see them being linked together with a digital ID and the central bank digital currency. I mean, the thing, what's interesting is this is all laid out. This is not even a secret anymore. It means that the government can track everything you do. So you go to the petrol station, you go to buy fuel, beep, beep.
Welcome back to G'day Bitcoin. Joining us today is Matthew Fraser, a sharp entrepreneur and Bitcoin advocate who takes a no-nonsense approach to wealth sovereignty and technology. His philosophy, super simple. Allocate to Bitcoin, sit back, watch what it does, because in his view, we're heading towards the dematerialization of all assets into Bitcoin. With a business track record of over $70 million in turnover, Fraser has deep roots in Australia's entrepreneurial scene, including a decade-long friendship with the great Adam Hudson. He's been at the forefront of the crypto collective, speaking out on the rise of digital IDs, the threat of CBDCs, and the tax agenda under Australia's Labor government, particularly around self-managed super funds and the controversial unrealized capital gains tax proposal. He even launched a petition, which I absolutely love, to protect tax-free super funds for Bitcoin and other assets. Never one to limit options, Fraser is also exploring international strategies for sovereignty, including Plan B passports in the UAE, ensuring freedom of movement and financial flexibility in an era of tightening regulations. Matthew, mate, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good, Sean. What an introduction. Unbelievable. Thank you so much for having me.
You're a pretty incredible guy, very inspiring, mate. And, that recent podcast that you and Adam Hudson did, you talked a little bit about your journey and how long you've known each other for and sort of dove into that. It's a real pleasure and honor to be able to be talking with you and get your message out today. I think we align on a lot of things. And I think probably what we align on the most at the moment is CBDCs, digital IDs, and what the Australian Labor government is doing. It just feels like there's this blatant attack on wealth accumulation in this country. Like, holistically, what are your thoughts at the moment with the path that it looks like this Labor government is just pushing through this? To me, I'd say it's a tyrannical agenda.
Well, if anyone's seen or read 1984, it's a whole Orwellian dystopian world, it's like coming true, Sean. I think the big wake up call for me, though, if we just go back a step, was actually COVID. Like that to me was a freaking wake up call. I couldn't believe what was going on, and I knew politicians, and I'm thinking, what are you doing, right? And it was so blatantly obvious that it was the biggest con that we had ever seen in the history of mankind. That's where I stood on it. Now, I'm very open about this, Sean. I didn't get the jab. None of my family did. In fact, we were prepared to just become hermits and just stay in the house. You know, there was people out there, Sean, that were saying, we want to go to the pub or we want to go to the shops. We're going to get the jab. No freaking way. There was no way that I was doing that. Anyway, you could see it was just all a big show. And so my point is that was the wake up call for me. And it was around that time that I sort of discovered Bitcoin, but it also coincided with my business as well. So I guess from there, it's then if we move on to sort of in recent years, I've become more awakened to politics. And I think the thing, Sean, is that most people, including my dad, for example, as you're growing up, you just think that the people in power have good intentions. And when I say just even politicians have good intentions for the country, even your doctor, you think your doctor has good intentions for you. And we just saw through that perhaps wasn't the case. There was a lot of, I guess, pressure on doctors, even if they knew the truth, they couldn't come out with the truth. So therefore, I really took this strong approach to questioning everything, which is kind of very aligned now into the Bitcoin ethos, which is question everything, which is then, of course, you go down the rabbit hole of what is money, the monetary system. It is very eye-opening. Now, if we bring that right to what's happening today under the tyrannical Labor government, it's a disgrace what is going on. When they started to talk about unrealized capital gains tax on superannuation, that's when I really hit the roof, because now it's attacking people's wealth. And you can imagine for a couple of 30 odd years now, people have been focusing on building their retirement savings in superannuation, only to come out to this period now and the government saying, actually, there's a $4.2 trillion honeypot there. We need some of that money. In fact, we're going to take some of it off you. Anyway, so my philosophy, Sean, is regardless of someone's wealth status, I don't believe the government should steal it.
Agreed. And with this, what I find so hard, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to chat with Jeff Wilson. If you haven't, I'll happily connect you to from Wilson Asset Management. I had him on the show, and we dove into
that
it.
Episode.
It's just makes absolutely no sense. I don't believe any other OECD country has implemented an unrealized capital gains tax. So I guess if you'd be able to take a moment with what is this proposed tax with Division 296, and like, why is it so bad? Why is not a realized capital gains tax, which we're all used to, but an unrealized capital gains tax? How do they differ, and why is it so much worse?
Well, if I just forget about super for a second, we just talk traditional assets. Generally speaking, under the taxation system that we all operate in within Australia, you only get taxed on a sale of an asset. So when something is let's use property as an example. You sell a property, and if there's an investment property that has a gain, you bought it for 500, you sell it for $1 million, you've now got a gain of $500,000. Now there's a tax that you've got to pay on the 500,000. Now, then of course you've got some different rules with capital gains discounts and what have you, depending on how long you've held the asset for. But the point is that you only pay the tax when you sell the asset, which I think for most people, I guess, I'm kind of become more against taxes in general. But for most people, they kind of stomach it. They're like, okay, we've sold the asset and we pay the tax. Under the unrealized capital gains tax, in the same scenario of the property, if let's say you had a property portfolio of over this $3 million, which is the current cap, even on that $1 million property, that $500,000 gain that you've had in that particular year, let's say, would now be taxed even if you did not sell the property. Right. And so when you relate this now back into superannuation, if you've got a lot of people have SMSFs, right, self-managed super funds, and quite often in Australia, Australia is heavily geared up on property. They love property, right? I'm actually turning away from property. Okay. Now I had my blinkers on for many, many years, Sean, so don't get me wrong. But so people have been indoctrinated into the property market, that it is the be all and end all. A lot of people have put properties in their self-managed super fund. Now, if you're accumulating properties, and you may have even heard stories about farmers who have these huge wads of land, in an SMSF. Now, they're most likely well over $3 million. And so what the government is now saying is if your SMSF now it goes over $3 million, you have to pay an unrealized capital gains tax above the $3 million. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but just to keep it simple. And so therefore, if you have accumulation of properties, which a lot of Australians do in an SMSF, you would now have to pay a tax. Now, how do you pay the tax, Sean? You're either going to have to come up with the money out of your own pocket, and it could be in the vicinity of, let's say the bill for this year is $100,000, right? On a capital gain above $3 million. Where are you coming up with that money? Out of your pocket? Or, which most people don't have that, most Australians don't have $100,000 sitting around in their bank balance, right? If it's tied up in property, that's where the assets are, the wealth is. They would then have to sell the asset. This is how ludicrous this is. You would have to sell the property to then pay the tax. But guess what? Because you sold the property, you now have to pay capital gains tax as well. It's just absolutely ludicrous. And I think that's why people like, even Paul Keating, former Prime Minister of Australia, former Treasurer of Australia, one of the architects for the superannuation system. Now, I'm not saying that I even believe in the superannuation system anymore, but he was one of the architects. A former Senator Bill Kelty, or at least minister, I think he was. Now, he was also an architect of the superannuation. They're both Labor stalwarts, Sean. They're opposing Labor's unrealised capital gains tax, right? So it is an absolute insidious tax. Now, let's turn this into Bitcoin. Let's say that you've accumulated Bitcoin in your SMSF. Now, I have converted all of my shitty industry super fund money getting like 7 or 8%. I've converted all that under an SMSF into Bitcoin.
Yeah, me
which
too.
in itself, which is congratulations to you, right? Because it is really it's the life raft I talk about for most Australians right now. And the window is closing on that too. So if you've now got over $3 million in your Bitcoin now, you would now have Bitcoin that you would have to sell to pay this unrealized capital gains tax, even if you didn't want to sell it, right? Absolutely outrageous. So I think people need to wake up to it. I'm surprised there's not marches in the street. I did start that petition, as you said, but I was actually calling for, let's get rid of all taxes. So no tax when you put the money in, no tax when you take the money out. And I know there's some different rules around that, depending on whether it's accumulation phase or pension phase. But just in general, no taxes whatsoever. So if the government truly does want people to save for their retirement, right? And I'm 46 years old now. Most people who get into their 40s, mid 40s to 50, you then start thinking about retirement, right? When you're in the 30s and 20s, you don't even think about it. I would say let's get rid of all taxes. And yeah, sure, put some money aside for your retirement, but let's not penalize people or tax them, one, for even putting the money in there. And secondly, if they've done very, very well. I want to make this other point, Sean, is that I've been absolutely, which I love, don't forget, on social media. I love getting attacked on social media. I was like, give it to me, guys. Let's go. These socialists and commies that are out there in the internet world attacking people like myself because we're opposed to the theft of our retirement savings, right? And that's because these people have basically got no life. They look at other people like yourself or myself who might have over $3 million in their super fund. You're too rich, right? They've put this imaginary cap on how much someone can possibly earn. And the thing that they make the mistake on, because they're stupid, is they think that if you've got over 3 million, you must have a very high paying job and you've taken, your 10%, 11% out of your wage to put into super, right? And the only way you can get to over 3 million is you've got a really high paying job. But what if people like you and me, Sean, actually had the balls and the courage and the conviction in a particular asset like Bitcoin, and we allocated to Bitcoin? And let's just say that grew over time because it's compounding at a 50+% CAGR at the moment. Right? Shouldn't we reap the rewards of that because we took the risk, we had the conviction, rather than people who didn't? So those people don't understand that. They don't understand that you can buy an asset and it could grow to over $3 million and you could be taxed. They just think you've got a high paying job and how dare you? You see the discrepancies?
If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safe Dina Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safe Dean, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safe Dina Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously Gday Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, Go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin way. So reach out to the Bitcoin way today. I think one of the other insidious things with the like $3 million unrealized capital gains, well, number one, it's not tied to inflation, but to be a self-funded retiree now, it's estimated that it's going to cost $3 million. So that's the number people need to achieve. So is that why they've come in at the $3 million? Because they don't want people to have personal agency, personal freedom, etc. But then also, like you're saying, by taking that risk, and people like, oh, you just got lucky or something. Yeah, like lucky that I didn't believe the media, lucky that I read like every single Bitcoin book, lucky that I put thousands and thousands of hours, years of my life into studying this asset class. And it wasn't just even studying Bitcoin. It was the 10 to 12 years before finding Bitcoin of trying to break free of the matrix, trying to be able to create wealth in my own life, and then realizing after that trial and error and like all those failures, I'm not getting compensated for all the failed businesses I've had, like everyone that I've had to pay off to be able to scrape by, you know, to be able to fix my own fuck ups. But as soon as you get something right, they just want to take it. And for the socialists or the communists to be like, you don't deserve that, it makes absolutely no sense. Like the people that have that money, if, let's say they didn't make it from investing and it was from a high paid job, the reason they're getting paid a high wage is because they're providing a high level of value or service to the marketplace. Don't we want to reward those people, and we want them to be self-funded and to be spending their money on things of value into the community and things like that? It's just all a farce. But I want to just double click into the self-managed super funds. You're an advocate of them. I'm an advocate for them. I'll put your links below, the links to my website where you can connect with either of our self-managed super fund partners. But if we stay in the traditional superannuation system, well, number one, you can't buy Bitcoin. That's why I went down the self-managed super fund. I called up the industry super fund and said, hey, can you guys allocate just a little bit to Bitcoin? They're like, no, we can't do that. And so I jumped on Google. I'm like, what super fund in Australia will allocate to Bitcoin? It's like, no super fund in Australia can allocate to Bitcoin. I'm like, how can I buy Bitcoin with my superannuation? It's like, you can't buy it with your superannuation, but if you were to set up a self-managed super fund, then you can buy it and then you can self-custody it. I was like, okay, how do I do that? And like set it up, you know, within the day. And I did the initial process. Obviously, it's better to do it as quick as possible because it can take a long time with the ATO and the bank sometimes if there's holdups, for example. And I think that's why we've got channel partners to be able to make it a little bit easier for people to be able to go through it. But you take these risks and you do it. Like you want to choose something where you're taking self-responsibility for it, knowing that if it goes wrong, that's on me. If it goes right, it's on me. But if it goes wrong, the ATO is like, that's not on me. Goes right, you owe us some. You're like, come on, guys, like give us a break. Life's already hard enough. You're debasing the currency at 11% a year at the moment, roughly 63% over the last 5 years. It's absolutely crazy. And then I think like as you pair these dystopian sort of tax laws along with digital IDs and then CBDCs, I think we could go down a slippery path straight away. So I want to sort of soft pivot towards digital IDs, and then we'll like weave all this back together towards then. But I know you've talked a little bit about him, you know, Anthony Albanese with his under 16 social media bill. We need to be able to protect the kids. It's always about being able to protect the kids because it pulls on the heartstrings. They're fucking pretty clever, these people. Sinister, but clever. And then we see Keir Starmer running with it as well. It's so that people aren't going to work illegally. They're already fucking working illegally. And they get paid in cash. But I guess CBDCs, then digital IDs, then you pair it with the CBDC. It does remove cash out of the economy. So what do you sort of think the agenda behind the digital IDs, and are they linked with CBDCs, or could you see them being linked with CBDCs? And then what happens?
Sean, I could definitely see them being linked together with a digital ID and the central bank digital currency. I think that's, what's interesting is this is all laid out under the WEF's 2030 agenda. This is not even a secret anymore. Happy. And my new catchphrase is, I will own nothing except for Bitcoin and be happy.
I love it.
Because I'm actually dematerializing everything anyway. I'm dematerializing all my physical assets, which we can go into that later as to why I'm doing that.
We will.
And the thing is, it's a big joke right now because everyone can see straight through what Keir Starmer's trying to do, which is We're going to bring in a digital ID. And the point he made was to stop illegal immigrants from working and essentially taking jobs from everyday Brits, right? And you think, God, he's a good guy. He's looking after the Brits, right? The UK has one of the strongest navies in the world. You think they couldn't just go and park some destroyers and frigates and what have you in the channel, right? And just say, guess what? No more immigrants. But what they've done is they've deliberately allowed that problem to take place. They could have easily have stopped the boats, right? They could have got old Tony Abbott over there and he would have sorted it out. Like that was his catchphrase in the 2013 Australian election, was stop the boats. And as soon as he got elected, you know what he did? He stopped the boats. He just sent the destroyers up there and they just turned them all back, right? And so the illegal trafficking stopped pretty much overnight. This is destroying Britain deliberately. I think it's by design. It's create the problem and now we've got the solution. And they're trying to run this. I think it was Switzerland, Sean, where they're trying to also bring in another digital ID. And they just had a vote on it. It's been through something like 3 times and it hasn't got passed by the public. And just recently, I think it was like 50.6% approved of it, right? Like, oh, look, they approve of it. So I think we're good to go now. And I think if people really realize, because I mean, we talk about it right now saying, oh, it's terrible. I actually sat down with someone before Keir Starmer was talking about it, and it was a parent at the school. And I said, you know, they're talking, this is to Bob, right? Bob, the other parent there. I said, you know, they're talking about bringing in a digital ID into Australia. And this was probably around when Albanese was talking about this under 16s, you know, protect the children social ID thing. And he said, no joke, he said, yeah, I think it's a good thing. And I was just like, really? He says, yeah, well, you know, I've got nothing to hide. You know, I'm happy if they want to see everything that I'm doing. And I said, well, do you also realize that it's going to probably, I believe, is going to be forming part of your social credit score, right? Now, for people that don't understand what the social credit score is, it means that the government can track everything you do. So you go to the petrol station, you go to buy fuel, beep, beep, sorry, declined. You've used too much fuel for the month. Your carbon credit is too much. Go to the checkout for Coles and buying some meat or something. Beep, beep, sorry, declined. You've overstepped your allowance for meat this month, right? Electricity, beep, beep, sorry, declined. And it's not even just purchasing things. There's things like, hey, we did a retina scan of you as you were driving down the road, and you know, we saw you, you know, holding a mobile phone or something. Boom, instantly driver license cancelled, and now you can't drive for like a year. Right? You can't even get into a car. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And if people love that type of idea of complete government control and oversight, then maybe move somewhere else where they've got it. And I always often talk about, Sean, let's create our own sovereign state within Australia, right? Where we can have our own Bitcoin standard. We can just be free people. On the flip side, I live very close to Byron Bay, home of the commies and the socialists, right? There's like total socialism down there. And I often joke and say, we should just sanction off Byron Bay and let them have it, right? They can fight amongst themselves and have all the commie shit they want down there, right? We don't want it out here. The proper people don't want it. So look, I think it's a major, major issue, and people really need to wake up to what's happening. And I'll be shocked if it actually gets passed eventually in the UK, because what they're talking about is bringing it in by the end of the term of government. So Keir Starmer, I think in the UK, they have about a 5-year term. So they've got about roughly another 4 years to go to roll this out. And let's just see how it does roll out and if there's going to be more marches in the street.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be interesting. What I've loved to see is the pushback in the last week. I think the figures I saw today was like 2.4 or 2.5 million people have petitioned against it. So the awareness, like in such a short period of time, like a matter of days, that's gotten out there. So I think that's pretty exciting to see that people are actually paying attention. But when it comes to Australia, that conversation is not there for the majority of people. I think Australians in general are starting to wake up with a couple of things that's happening. Like just this week, Monday, twice within 24 hours, I got totally debanked from our company bank accounts trying to buy Bitcoin. So we can go into that as well. But there's just like all these little touch points, and people are now, I think, really in the last 6 to 12 months, feeling the effects of inflation. A lot of the rhetoric is still, other greedy grocers or whatever. But when you start to talk to people, they're like, oh, it's so expensive. And you have a conversation, you're like, you do realize they're not just jacking up the prices for no reason. It's because the government printed so much more currency in response to the COVID pandemic or scamdemic, whatever you want to call it. And they're like, oh, is that how inflation works? Yes, that's exactly how inflation works. The government's directly responsible for it. And then you're like, you do understand that the Australian dollar since 1966, I believe, has lost 93% of its purchasing power. Whoa. In the last 6 years, it's lost more than 50% of its purchasing power. Whoa. What can I do? Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what you can do. You can read the books, the big print.
Yeah.
You start there and start to understand it. But I think now Australians are really starting to feel that pain. Their pay may go up with a little bit with inflation or something, but not enough for real inflation. They get the inflation numbers and figures from Jim Chalmers, which is so made up. Is celebrating the other day, and they're starting to realize that the math is not mathing anymore. So I guess that brings us directly into Bitcoin. And how does Bitcoin protect someone with all of these things? In a self-managed super fund, how does Bitcoin protect someone's retirement? In their personal fund, when they hold their own keys, you have to hold your own Bitcoin keys, ladies and gentlemen. There's no option. It can't be on the exchange. It can't be on the ETF. You have to take 100% self-custody with that. But then how does it also open up like freedom of movement, like Plan B citizenships, etc.? How does it save you, even if they bring out digital IDs and CBDCs? If you've got a relationship with a butcher or something, it's this peer-to-peer electronic money. How does Bitcoin come in and actually make everything better? Like, how's Bitcoin fix this?
Well, first of all, I want to say on this whole self-custody thing, Sean, I've been a big fan of your channel for so long that I actually signed up with the Bitcoin Way, the trusted cyber security partners. And I know that you're a big fan of them, and I signed up through you. So thank you so much for introducing me to the Bitcoin Way. And I think that everyone should do that. I know you probably have a link in your description below, and people should really take advantage of that, because it really is absolutely the most important thing you could possibly do. When you get the node and you've got your own sovereign bank, your world starts to change, and you do start to realize that, hey, the Bitcoin is in my possession and no one else can seize it. It's really, really powerful. Look, I talk to so many people, particularly in my own online community, which has now grown to like over 1,400 people, mainly Australians. It actually started because I was a bit, what do I want to do with my life? I wanted to continue talking about Bitcoin. I'm just going to create this community, and it's just completely gone bananas. But what
I'll link it below for everyone. It's free.
Thanks, Sean.
By the way,
you can come in there. Yeah, it's absolutely free to join. And what I do in there is I've got just information about Bitcoin, of course, but in particular, I've got a step-by-step guide of actually how to move your funds from your industry super or retail super into an SMSF and allocate to Bitcoin. My dad has, my sister, my dad has bought Bitcoin. I want to say that, right? He's 74. He's got his own Bitcoin stack. But nice. Both of my sisters have now created an SMSF and allocated to Bitcoin, right? Because they've seen obviously the purchasing power of their own money going down. Their super is absolutely struggling. I spoke to a friend of mine the other day. He's nearly 50 years old. I said, dude, how much money have you got in super right now? 180 grand. I was like, oh my God. I said, can I say the F word? I literally said,
of course.
You're fucked.
Yeah.
Right.
Proper.
And I wanted to just say that to him in a way like, dude, you need to wake up. Because I said, unless you want to retire on the pension, then fine. Like, don't do anything. Like, do nothing then if you want to retire on the pension. Do you know that the Australian industry super funds, they've got this website, right? It tells you how much you should expect to live on when you retire. At the moment, because the thing is, Sean, we were indoctrinated into super, most people think that when they just go to work, boop, 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 beep, boop, they go to work, they finish at 65 or whatever, and they're just going to have this amazing life. Oh, that's the time I can sort of travel the world and buy the caravan and do all this, right? That's not happening, right? When you do the numbers, so the superannuation industry website tells you that even on the best case for the average Australian, you will be able to retire at 65, and you'll be able to go on one international holiday once every 7 years. Right? That's what they classify as great. Once every 7 years.
Hell.
By the time you get to, what is that, early 70s, you've been on one. So by the time you get to 80, you may have been on 2 international holidays, right? It is a disgrace. Even at the lower end, when you're on a pension, it actually says, how many haircuts do you expect to get? You can't have any haircuts. You cannot afford a haircut. They're like, you're going to have to cut your own hair. Right. So this is the reality and the practical side of what does it mean to have minimal amount of money in retirement. It's going to mean you probably can't retire. You've probably got to keep working. Mark Burros is now famous. I saw a clip of him. He's like, look, most Australians are going to have to work until they're 80 or 90. Because if they think they're retiring at 65, their money's just not going to last because they're living older as well, right? That is the other factor. So you're going to basically live older and you're going to be poor for most of it, right? And that one I told you about at the beginning of, holiday one holiday every 7 years. That's if you own your own house, right? So if you're renting, you're double fucked. So I encourage people to look at allocating to Bitcoin as a hedge against the currency debasement, the money printing, right? Because so that they can stack a pile, and in retirement, they can then say, hey, you know what? At least this has grown at a CAGR right now, roughly, Sean. If you listen to Michael Saylor, at least 29% over the next 20 years. And then after that, probably down to 21%. If you can withstand the volatility, the great thing about allocating in an SMSF is that you can't touch it anyway. So you either leave it in your shithouse 7 to 8%, at best case 10% average, right? Which is not going to deliver you a good retirement, or one that you probably think you're going to get, or you allocate to Bitcoin. Now, people should also know they don't have to allocate. Let's say you're on the fence. You're like, oh, I don't know, Sean. I know Sean talks it up a lot and he's got his super in Bitcoin, but I don't have the conviction like Sean has. No problem. You might have 180 grand sitting in super like my friend. You could just pull out 80 grand, right? You just put 80 grand of your super into an SMSF and have two things happening. What you're going to hear, though, from financial advisors, right, who most likely are broke themselves. Okay, this is what I love, right? They're providing advice on finances and retirement. They can't. They're living paycheck to paycheck, Sean, right? But if you put $80,000 into Bitcoin, I believe that will grow substantially, far greater than even your 100,000 left in your industry fund.
Of course,
and will set you up for retirement. So people have got options, is what I want to say.
Yep, I think that's a great option. I think one caveat is, yes, Bitcoin is volatile and the volatility is coming out of the markets with the big hedge funds, Wall Street and everything like that. We're not getting these big 36% drawdowns that we could get on any random Tuesday. They're sort of, I want them to come back. Like I'm hoping for more dips, but it sort of feels like they're going away. And Bitcoin only moves like 9 to 11 days per year. So it's sort of like sideways or down, and then it'll make its moves. And today is almost one of those moves. I think you could almost count it as one of those 1 day out of 11 this year. But keeping a traditional industry super fund, like you can talk to Matt's partners, you can talk to my partners, you can talk to anyone else that provides self-managed super fund setup. Just find someone that understands allocating to Bitcoin specifically, that's put in a bit of effort so you don't get talked out of that. So a big lot of feedback that I've gotten. I've talked to people about setting up a self-managed super fund and buying a Bitcoin. The financial advisor says, no, you shouldn't do that. By keeping your traditional one that you have at the moment and then your self-managed super fund, with a self-managed super fund, it's whatever you choose to put in there or add on top of it. So like insurance and things, it doesn't necessarily come with it. Your super fund, industry super fund that you've had for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years might already have great life insurance and things like that, or other things attached to it, which may not provide you cash flow or money, but which may be beneficial. You don't want to just shut that down on a whim because you get all excited about Bitcoin. Like take it slow, talk to somebody that understands what's going on, because there may be a benefit of even leaving 5 grand, 10 grand, or leaving that 100 grand in there and just rolling a little bit out. But over to you, brother.
Well, Sean, that's a really good point that you've just raised there. So I want to bring up 2 points now. One is I actually do know someone very close to me who did close down their industry or retail super fund. And then within a month, her husband got diagnosed with brain cancer. And so because he closed his super down, that came with some insurances. So they missed out on $300,000 to $500,000, which would have really helped them. So So Sean's point of perhaps leaving that open. Now, the other option, of course, for people is you can shut that down. And what had happened, Sean, is they knew the insurance had gone. But when they opened up their SMSF, there was like, and he's only very young. I think it was like 32 or something, right? 30 odd years old. We'll worry about the insurance later. We'll get to that later. Okay. So I want to just say the most important thing out of this conversation is definitely seek advice from someone who knows the setup, who can give you the right advice, because we are both not financial advisors. And make sure it's set up properly so you don't have something like that happens to you, and you can be looked after if and when. And of course, that's why you have insurance, right? It's the unexpected. And of course, this was totally unexpected, just completely came out of the blue. So the other point I want to make too is, though, you also at the same token have to go with someone who you can trust. And this is so important, because we've just seen recently, Sean, that even financial advisors can steer you in the wrong direction, allocating your super to funds. For example, the two that just collapsed in Australia recently, where 12,000 people, it was over like $1 billion, evaporated into thin air. Okay. An absolute tragic set of circumstance for people. There was even stories about guys who, they're 65, they're literally retiring next week. They go to their fund account, gone. Right. This guy had like over $1 million in there, like ready for a decent retirement. So you've got to really have your wits about you, and just, I guess maybe not necessarily listen to the financial advisor. Like, what is the ulterior motive here? And it turned out the ulterior motive was they were getting kickbacks. Right? Bitcoin doesn't provide kickbacks.
No. Bitcoin provides, personally, like if you buy Bitcoin, you hold on to it for a long enough time, it's going to kick back a whole lot more life and time to you. That's the kickback that Bitcoin.
But if yes, right. But if you or I recommended to someone, of course, right, it's not like the Bitcoin treasury is sending us some Bitcoin because we sold someone into Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's right. And like I've spent now $2,350 or more this year handing this book out, and a couple of other Bitcoin books to people. I'm like, I believe in this so much. I've spent my own money to be able to give it to you. If you read it within a week, I'll give you another $50 in Bitcoin just for reading. They're like, why? I'm like, so that you understand Bitcoin, you get Bitcoin. They're like, what's in it for you? I'm like, nothing. And they're like, no, what's in it for you? I'm like, the peace, the satisfaction that my friends and family and my community are not going to struggle. They're not going to be broke. They're not going to be subject to the tyranny. That's what's in it for me. They're like, no, like if I buy, is it going to pump your Bitcoin back? It's like over a $2 trillion market cap. Like, come on, guys. Like, like you buying a little bit, even if it's tens of millions of dollars, it's not going to do anything to my bag or your bag or anything like that. Like we've seen, people, one whale sold $12 billion over like a 30-day period, hardly moved the price. Michael Saylor will buy billions of dollars, I think 23 billion or whatever it was on the weekend. Price doesn't move or whatever. And then it's just those 11 days where there's just no supply and it's just bang to the upside. But there's really, like, the ulterior motive is it's nicer being around people that have time, energy, the capacity to be able to think. And that comes down to having a bit of wealth behind you, to whatever extent. And that may be somebody starting out that's living paycheck to paycheck. They've got a month of savings that they can live off if something goes wrong. And then it goes to like 5 weeks and 6 weeks, and then it extends out to a quarter, and then 6 months, and then a year, and then you get two years of runway or whatever. And then you just realize that you've got the power to be able to say, like, no, I don't want to do that. Fuck you. Like, I quit or whatever. You're having a bad day, or you can't be coerced into anything, which I think is pretty powerful. But when you keep going deeper down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and you start to see like digital IDs, the tyranny, central bank digital currencies, just even the attack of freedom of speech, it's like, that's what I believe in most of all. Is I might not agree with something somebody says, but I will respect them because they believe in their beliefs so much. I may not agree with their beliefs in the slightest or whatever, or I may agree with some things or another, but I respect them. The marches in Australia, both sides, I respect it. We live in a free country, supposedly. They should be able to do that. It's just like the small minority of people in the front lines that cause the issues. On the front, like on the left or the right, I think the majority of people are just wanting to get their emotions heard and the anger and the pain and everything like that. All for it. But when you're like, this group can speak, that group can't speak, you're racist or you're right wing or left wing or whatever it is, and they just try to shut down one side of the conversation, but not both sides. You're like, this is too much. Like, what's going on? And like, you see all those things, digital IDs, CBDCs that we're mentioning, cost of living, the money printing, it's getting harder and harder, just the wealth taxes. So then a lot of Bitcoiners start talking about Plan B passports. And I've had Tony Yazbek on. I've got a Plan B passport for somewhere as well. It's not a tax haven. It's just sort of the next step if things were to really go wrong dramatically. But I love this country. It's amazing. Like, I walk upstairs, we're looking out at the Great Barrier Reef. I don't want to leave that. Like, I love it. But it's good to know, dude, so special. It's good to know that I do have that option. And something you said earlier is you're dematerializing your life. Like, you've made a lot of money, serial entrepreneur, you've got all the cars, the real estate, commercial, residential, etc. But now you're in this process of dematerializing your wealth, and you're seriously looking to options for a Plan B passport. How do those, I guess, first question, what the hell does dematerializing your life mean? And then how does that tie in with the Plan B passport?
I've coined the phrase dematerializing, and other people are starting to catch on to it now.
I love it.
And so what, I guess there's a couple of parts to this. One is that I think in Australia, Sean, we have this thing where you want to build wealth, through business or what have you. You buy property, and if you, I've done quite well in business. So you're like, oh, I'm going to go buy some cars, and one car leads to the next car, and then I've got like 10 cars basically. And then you get to that and you think, actually, this is actually a bit of a pain. This is a real pain for me, because now I've got all these insurances and I've got like 10 lots of like servicing. So now it becomes time. And although it's fun to have these things, eventually you just kind of get a bit sick of it. And it's not just me. I just spoke to a guy the other day, multi. This guy's got like $1 million in watches, like sitting in the cabinet, right? 4 Harley Davidson bikes, okay? I was talking to this guy the other day. He's like, what you said the other day really resonated with me, because I think I want to dematerialize as well, right? So this has become like a bit of a thing now that I've found, and people are gravitating to me because I'm talking about it openly. So I'm getting rid of the cars are all gone, by the way, except for my 2 cars that I use daily cars.
Nice.
The car collection's gone. My first commercial property's gone. I've got 2 more commercial properties to go, which I've got one settling on the 24th, another one settling 30 days after that, this in October. I've then got another residential property to go, right? So, and there's that, and then I've still got the house that I live in. But most of those big things will start going, and I'm putting the majority of that, obviously I've got to pay off some mortgages and things like that, but the majority of that is then going to go back into Bitcoin, right? Now, I do a couple of things though, not just like Bitcoin as in the pure Bitcoin, but I also mine Bitcoin into pure Bitcoin, right? So I do a few different things to continually have my flow coming in. And I absolutely love Bitcoin mining as well, right? Because
we have to talk about KYC free Bitcoin,
which is a whole
Let's
other
come back
episode
to that.
Almost. It's almost a whole other episode. Let me wrap up
the last bit. We'll touch on the KYC briefly, but keep going.
I'm dematerializing to put more money into Bitcoin, and secondly too, it's actually not even if I think about the properties, it's the control that the government has over the properties as well. Right. So when we talk about unrealized capital gains tax, and if I just circle back to that for a second, there was a wake up call for me. I'm like, shit, if they're going to come after super and that passes, why would they just not come after properties or just any other legal entity structure, trust companies, etc. Right? There'll be no reason for them to say, oh, well, we're just going to unrealized capital gains, all this other stuff now because we're money hungry now. We've got no money of our own, right? Because we're spending money like drunken sailors. So I was like, get rid of that. In residential property right now, if you personally hold residential property, you are considered evil, right? The commies and the socialists hate it, right? Because particularly if you've got investment properties. Okay, so the government right now has either
greedy landlords,
greedy landlords, so they have rental caps, or if I don't want to have someone come in with like 10 dogs, I have to let them come in. I don't have the right now to say you can't come in with animals, right? Whether I like animals or not. So, and I do love animals, but I don't have the right over my own property, right? And I don't like that kind of control. So that's another reason to get out of it. And the better asset to allocate to for all the attributes that you and I both know about, Sean, is Bitcoin, right? So I'm just dumping it. It also ties in with the plan B. So if I get to the point and I'm not 110% going, but I'm meeting with visa agents. I'm looking at, I'm talking to tax lawyers, right? I'm doing all the steps, but I'm leaving a sort of a caveat there. It's like, I don't have to go if I don't want to, right? Because of course you've got to bring your family along on this journey too. So I will get to the point where I'll have the Plan B passport and all my assets will be dematerialized, and then I can just go pretty much whenever I want. That's kind of where we're headed to. On that note, I just want to say to people, when people get, like you and I, we get orange pilled. My wife wasn't orange pilled at the same time as me. My wife is not
neither
also
mine.
plan B pilled the same time as me. So although I've got the higher conviction in the beginning, it takes time. And I think people have to bring their partner along the journey as well. Because when I said to Paula one day, baby, I think we should allocate to our super into Bitcoin, that wasn't the first day of me discovering Bitcoin, right? That was a journey to get to that point. In fact, there were people I'd met before discovering this who had told me that they had allocated their super to Bitcoin. And I remember thinking, these guys are crazy. This is what I was thinking. I'm like, man, you should be diversifying. This is what I had in my head. You got to diversify. But of course, once you read the books, you do the homework, just like you talk about, Sean, you then understand why.
Yeah. And I think if people say start with The Big Print by Lawrence Lepard, they follow it up with Parallel by Brian Siemens, and then maybe like The Bitcoin Standard. That's, I would say, 50 hours of reading material there. I think that would give someone like 150 to 200 hours of concentrated knowledge that's been dispensed. And then if you can put in a couple of like key podcasts, like the video by Joe, What's the Problem, etc., it takes 1,000 hours, I think, before you start to get to this like really orange pill. 100 hours, the lights go off. I think you can do that now with The Big Print, 13.5 hour read. You've got that 100 hours of knowledge. And then you get to 200. But once you get to 1,000, it's just being very selective with what you're doing, because it comes back to this conversation of like signal versus noise. There is so much information and stuff out there now. Or you may start with the Bitcoin Standard, but I've handed that book to so many people, Matthew, and they like, give it back to me like this. Like, it's too much, man. I'm like, oh, really? Like I'll go to Beers for Bitcoin or whatever. And I've found the most success with The Big Print. It's had the biggest impact, orange pilling my wife, which took like many years later as well.
Yeah. Let me throw another book at you, Sean. Can I throw another one in there for the audience? Brian DeMint's Bitcoin Evangelism.
Well, right? Parallel's his second book.
I know, but I think the Bitcoin Evangelism is a bit more palatable rather than sometimes the Bitcoin Standard, right? Because he kind of tells it in a story format in a way of how he discovered it. So I think that is also a good one for audiences as well.
Yeah, maybe just not as academic. I think if you're like academically trained or academically minded, or you're like really deep into the financial system already, but willing to see a different view, the Bitcoin Standard. And I think the Bitcoin Standard is an essential reading book. I just don't think it's the first book. I'd put it sort of like 3 to 5 on the reading list. As a reader, just out of curiosity, have you read Eric Kayson's Crypto Sovereignty?
Oh, geez, you know what? I have a stack of books like literally behind me. Like I went book crazy. And just started buying. I've got to get this book. I went through all of Michael Saylor's Hope website, and any book that he had on there, I was like, just buy. And I just haven't got to the stack. You know what I mean? Like there's such a huge stack there, but I've got them. But I've definitely read the Bitcoin Standard, right? Which is essential reading for anybody. But I don't know about that one.
Yeah. It's like I tell people they need to read at least 5 Bitcoin books first, because Eric Kayson is just an amazing individual, crypto anarchist, phenomenal. But for a new person, it'd scare them away. But I think you'd love it. It's intense. It's real, but it's highly enjoyable. So I just want to spend like a couple of minutes talking about KYC free Bitcoin, like literally like 3 to 5. I think we are going to have to do a whole podcast strictly on it because it's such a big topic. But you are an advocate for mining Bitcoin. I want you to talk about 2 things, like how do you get KYC free Bitcoin, but also what are the costs? Because you can't, like if you just put $100,000 into Bitcoin, then it's $100,000 of Bitcoin. If you put $100,000 into miners, it's going to spit Bitcoin out over time. But like really, you need to be able to pay those miners off as well. And then they need to be upgraded in a few years and stuff. So there are costs.
Yeah, Sean. People should not tune out now. They need to stay tuned into this. This is going to be just gold dropping just bombs everywhere in the next 2 minutes, right? Because people are going to be thinking, how the fuck do I get more Bitcoin? And the thing is, what people want is they want sovereignty and they want privacy when they're getting Bitcoin, particularly. It just turns out that when you buy a Bitcoin mining machine, the banks don't have any scrutiny on it. Austrac doesn't have any scrutiny on it. The ATO doesn't have any scrutiny on it. You are literally buying computers. That's all you're buying. And the big issue that we kind of haven't touched on yet is trying to get funds from your bank into, let's say, an exchange, right? Which is a night, but you've just been debanked, as you said before, right?
Twice this week.
It's shocking. We'll have to talk about that later. But if you can transfer like 100 grand over to a Bitcoin mining place, and I use the mining store based out of Melbourne, right? They're an Australian company. They're the best in the business. I can just transfer $100,000 to the mining store. They allocate it to Bitcoin mining machines, and it's done. I don't have any blockages. No one's debanking me. And there's no reporting on it. There's no KYC. So people have to understand that when you go to like a bank, when you go set up an exchange, mostly, particularly in Australia, you'll have to do a KYC. KYC is know your customer. You have to give up all your ID. They know who you are. Right now, some people might be happy with that, but if you're just someone who wants to get non-KYC Bitcoin, mining is it. The second thing to think about is it's also virgin Bitcoin, right? It hasn't been through 10,000 other hands through the blockchain, okay? So when you're receiving the Bitcoin, it's like the first bit, okay? So it's not, I don't know how you would describe it, Sean. It's not been stamped many, many times with other people's fingerprints, right? You're receiving the Bitcoin, and you're also getting Bitcoin cheaper than what you would get it through an exchange. Because of course the exchanges, the businesses, they need to put a margin and a premium on the purchase themselves, right? So you're getting it direct. That's just a few of the attributes of the reason I love. And of course, I just love the fact that I'm a part of the network, right? The Bitcoin mining is a part of the network. I'm supporting the network. Now, as far as stacking goes, yes, there are some costs you've got to think about. You've got to obviously buy the machines. You've got to also pay for electricity ongoing. Now, I don't really care though, because of the reasons of buying it virgin, non-KYC, and stacking it in my own sovereign wallet. So there's some of the things, Sean, right? Without going too deep.
Yeah, I think we need to do a whole nother podcast, Matthew, on it. But for everyone, I've linked Matthew's YouTube channel below. Like, you absolutely must subscribe. Highly recommended, highly endorsed. And then Matt goes into a lot, and with Adam Hudson, you went into it a bit deeper as well. I love that episode with you too. I loved it how I saw the episode with you and him on his channel, and then as
we did a swapsy.
You and him, yeah,
maybe we should do a swapsy. We should do a swapsy. You come on the Crypto Collective.
We'll do that. It won't be straight after this one today, though. But Matthew. No. It's been a hectic day. It's crazy. It's been a hectic week with the banks and everything, but we'll save that for another time. But I'm just going to hand over the microphone. The floor is yours. Take a moment or two to whatever's top of mind, whatever you're the most passionate about or could be the most impactful for someone new to Bitcoin or new on their wealth acquiring journey or that's been here for a long time. Whatever it is, whatever message, burning desire you want to get across, it's all yours.
Sean, well, thank you so much. There's so much I could really say. The first thing I think is that people shouldn't look up to me as the be all and end all, as the voice of Bitcoin. What I find is that I'm just on the journey just like everybody else, right? I might know a little bit more than some people. And what I also love about Bitcoin is I'm learning about Bitcoin every single day. There's something new that comes up that I'm thinking, I didn't know I could lend against Bitcoin. I didn't know I could do this with Bitcoin. And I think that's what's so powerful. So I think people should just come in and just think, if they're thinking, oh, I don't know about Bitcoin, we've all started at the beginning. I was actually someone, Sean, who was opposed to Bitcoin, like avidly opposed to Bitcoin in the last decade because I didn't understand it. I hadn't done the research. I hadn't put in the work, right? So I think people just need to go on their own journey and also understand that we are still early in the cycle of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is going to be being mined, let's say, if we go back to mining, up until the year 2140. Right. So there is a long runway of Bitcoin. And I think in 10 years' time, in 5 years' time, people will look back to the people that bought in 2025 and say, wow, you guys, you were pioneers. How did you have the foresight to buy Bitcoin in 2025? So I think there's never a late time to allocate. I also want to say that I really do think that the window is closing for people who want to allocate in Australia. It's very, very difficult right now because the banks are basically against it. Now, you can still do it, right? There are options. That's why they should join, and listen to people like yourself, Sean, because you've got some insight into different things. My community, I've got a lot of insight into how do we move money from a bank to exchanges? What are the things that we can do to make sure it gets across, right? There's many different sort of options that are behind the scenes, I guess. It can be a little bit more complicated. That's why you have to have a step-by-step, but people can do it, and they really just need to take the first step. I always say to people, Sean, just start with like $100. Don't overcomplicate this, right? Because I think a lot of people come in thinking, oh, I've got, he's talking about putting all my superannuation in there. Oh, it's too complicated. No, start with setting up an exchange. I advocate for CoinStash. Personally, I think they're the number one exchange in Australia. They're certainly for SMSF, they are. So you set up a CoinStash account, you send over $100, and you just start there. You learn the processes, the systems, and then you'll head off into the stratosphere after that, certainly with your knowledge and understanding. And you'll probably end up in a position just like me, where you just start selling everything around the house, right? If it's not cars and properties, it's going to be the exercise bike and the jet ski that you don't drive anymore.
I think that's a good place to be able to end it there, but I'm going to put the link to Matthew's free community in the description below, as well as his YouTube, social medias and stuff. And I definitely, if you're interested in KYC free Bitcoin, check out some of the specific videos that Mathew has done on mining Bitcoin, because it is something that I'm very interested in and I want to learn more about as well. I absolutely appreciate your time. It's fascinating. I love the signal that you're getting out there and tuning into your podcasts.
Thanks, Sean. Mate, I absolutely think you're a legend in this space. It's been an absolute honor to be on your channel, and I look forward to seeing you in person, maybe in November at the CryptoCon.
I will not be traveling for Bitcoin this year. No, not this year. Okay. It's just
maybe we can meet up in person some other time.
Yeah, maybe at Christmas actually, but we'll talk after we get off here. For everyone out there, please do something nice for yourself today. For somebody else out there, be blessed. Peace.